Hello, welcome to The Mint. I'm Andy Hodges. Now, we thought that we would try and break down some of all these economic terms and numbers that are getting thrown at you on a daily, if not weekly basis. Today, we're going to ask, what is the Consumer Price Index, or CPI? Because the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe last week released some new CPI figures. Well, Consumer Price Index is a measure that examines the weighted average of prices of a basket of consumer goods and services. Included in that basket is transportation, food, and medical care. It is calculated by taking price changes for each item and averaging them out. Now, changes in the CPI are used to assess price changes associated with our cost of living. The CPI is one of the most frequently used statistics for identifying periods of inflation or deflation. The CPI represents the cost of a basket of goods and services across the country on a monthly basis. Those goods and services are broken down into 8 major groups. Now, the month-on-month inflation rate in October 2019 was 38.75%, gaining over 21 percentage points on the September number of 17.72%. This means that prices as measured by the all-item CPI increased by an average rate of 38.75% from September 2019 to October. Look, the mean month-on-month rate of inflation for the period January to October 2019 was 17%, while for the same period in 2018, listen to this number, it was only 1.9%. The annual average rate of inflation month-on-month for 2018 was 3.1%. So you can see that inflation is a major driver of the cost of living in Zimbabwe. Let's put this simply. Simply put, the Consumer Price Index measures how much more you paid for selected goods, services, and basic commodities. In this case, the difference you paid between October and September 2019. More importantly, CPI is widely used as an economic indicator. It is the most widely used measure of inflation and, by proxy, the effectiveness of the government's economic policy. In Zimbabwe, the 4 main components of the Consumer Price Index are food and non-alcoholic beverages, housing and utilities, household contents equipment, and maintenance and transport. The Consumer Price Index is linked to the general inflation rate in the country. So the higher the inflation, the higher prices will increase, and vice versa if inflation is low. Some ways of keeping inflation low can include 1. The effective management of the exchange rate. A rising exchange rate will have an impact on basic commodities. As imports will become more expensive, the cost of importing raw materials by manufacturers will increase, and they will be forced to pass on such costs to you and me, the consumers. Number 2, import substitution. Cutting down the import bill via import substitution, for example, and also producing basic commodities within Zimbabwe will reduce the costs of basic goods within the country. Number 3, fuel and energy prices. Look, it appears to be given in Zimbabwe that when fuel and electricity prices rise, so will prices of basic commodities. This is due in part to the increased cost by retailers and manufacturers in bringing their products to market. This does not only affect large manufacturers, but will also have an impact on SMEs and the majority of us who are working in the informal sector. For example, recently the Zimbabwe Energy Regulatory Authority, Xtra, approved a 320% electricity tariff increase in October, and that was on top of a 400% increase in August 2019. And of course, almost every Monday, Zimbabweans are met with fuel price increases. For example, this week, fuel has been adjusted to $17.74 for diesel and $17.07 for petrol. And number 4, controlling money supply. Money supply is the total amount of money in circulation or in existence in a country. The more money in circulation, the more money is trying to buy goods and services. High money supply in any economy will lead to inflationary pressures, which is why the Minister of Finance in his budget stressed that government must live within the budget, must not print money, and government will not utilize the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe overdraft. We're joined here on The Mint by Golden Sibanda from Zimpaper's own Business Weekly. Golden, first of all, why is the Consumer Price Index so important for Zimbabweans?
Thank you, Andy. Basically, we need to briefly define what Consumer Price Index is. It's just a system basis or a way of measuring changes in prices. If you want to be fancy, you'd say inflation. So it's just a way or framework through which usually economists measure changes in price of goods and services.
So basically put, if for example a loaf of bread was say $10 last month and today it's $10.50, that difference in 50 cents would be perceived as a consumer price index or the change in the price of the basic commodity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so when you are measuring price over a given period of time, usually a month or a year, then you've got probably a picture or a trend of how things are panning out over a given period of time. So you're able to maybe plan and make sense of where things are coming from and where things are going.
But however, this of course is linked to inflation as well, because it also signifies how much prices are going up for ordinary Zimbabweans in terms of our cost of living. So what are the major factors you feel that drive the inflation at the moment?
No, one of the most important factors in terms of the behavior of inflation, Andy, is the issue of money supply. So if you have too much money within the system, money in circulation, you actually create too much demand for a specific kind of products that then leads to, or for general demand for commodities in a country. So when you have that sort of situation, you then have what is called inflation, the changes in prices of goods and services over a given period of time. The other factor that is also important in terms of the behavior of inflation is the issue of exchange rate, especially for a country like Zimbabwe, which is import dependent because there's little production. So every time there's change in demand in the exchange rate, you also have pressure on inflation because we are importing a lot of these things and we are using foreign currency. So that pressure and the change in the pressure on the demand for forex and then vis-a-vis the prices, you then have those pressures continually driving the movement in prices. So essentially, we expect that if the rate goes down, price should go up. When the exchange rate goes up, we also expect prices to go up because you need foreign currency to import those commodities.
Of course, another cost driver or push factor is the cost of fuel and electricity.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, those are what we call key enablers. The cost of fuel is actually directly related to the cost of production. So goes for electricity. So when you have electricity prices go up, you also expect that the producers or the suppliers of those particular commodities to also factor in the cost of those key utilities in the provision of goods and services.
Right, that was Golden Sibanda from Zim Paper's own Business Weekly. Please make sure you go out and get your copy every Friday morning with all the top economic news in the country. So the battle against inflation is critical to keeping prices of goods and services stable in any economy, and Zimbabwe is no different. One aspect of the budget last week was to do exactly that. Well, we will see if government's efforts to tame inflation are successful, and frankly, we hope that such efforts are, because it will stabilize and even lower, hopefully, the ever-increasing prices of basic commodities and services, and it will hopefully reduce them, putting more money in our pocket and being able for most of us to be able to afford such basic commodities. Well, I'm Andy Hodges, and you've been watching The Mint. Goodbye, and you all be safe.